Hey everyone, how we doing today? This is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit, and welcome back to another video. And as part of the Ask SplitSuit a Question series, a bunch of people asked hand history questions, and this one actually came privately via Facebook. And Steve just wants me to review a hand he played with Ace-King suited. He says he'd be grateful for any opinion on this one, and it's a hand with multiple angles to consider. So let's check it out. Okay, so this hand is from 16 No Limit on PokerStars. There's a limp, there's a raise, there's a call, a fold, a call, and here decides to call as well. So Steve starts this out by saying, would I have squeezed everyone preflop, even with the initial raise to 5x against the limp of the other fish? So obviously the assumption being that player 9 is most likely fishy, and given the starting stack size, I'd say that's totally possible. Given the open limp from early position, I'd say that's definitely possible. And to be fair, player 1's size in terms of 5x is very typical as an isolation size, so I'm not going to say too much about that. I do want to quickly think about what player 2 and player 4 would call with here, because I think some players just like totally forget to think about that. But if you really think about it, both of their ranges are probably pretty capped in the sense that they're not going to have things like aces, kings, queens, that kind of stuff when they just call. They would 3-bet those hands. So because of that, when they just call, their range is probably going to be capped at like maybe jacks, but more realistically things like 10s, 9s, 8s, and also double Broadway things, which we do really well against, like ace, queen, ace, jack, king, queen, also things like suited connectors, which we do well against, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm really trying to say here is we're doing really, really well against those two guys. We have no reason to think that player 1 only has the nuts. Player 9 looks fishy, blah, blah, blah. Another thing that I always want to think about. So whenever we're in a situation like this, we should always say, okay, well, what happens when we squeeze? Is that good? Is that bad? And then also consider the other, which is if we flat, is that good? Is that bad? And if we flat call here, I'm not sure what player 6 is going to do, but probably not going to be squeezing here a tremendous amount of the time, which means more realistically, we call 6 folds, player 9 calls, and now all of a sudden we're going 5-way out of position with ace-king. And that's not going to be super fun. Ace-King is a hand that does really, really well in heads-up pots and does not do particularly well in multi-way pots, or at least it doesn't do as well, I should say. So this is the kind of situation where I don't want to call and create a 5-way pot. That's just going to kind of suck. So what I'd rather do is just squeeze, and I'd squeeze this up to probably like, I don't know, 360 give or take, go from there and feel pretty comfortable about things. So some people may say, well, if we go that side, we're not getting action from second best hands like ace-queen, and they're just going to like fold things like king-queen and stuff like that. And my retort would be, that's okay. Because if we squeeze and everyone folds, we're picking up like 17, 18 big blinds uncontested, and there's nothing wrong with that. So again, this is the kind of situation I'd much prefer to be aggressive, squeeze here. I don't really expect to get a tremendous amount of action unless anyone here is fishy, and by that I'm more specifically mean player 2 or player 4. I don't think player 9, unless he's just like terrible, like an 88-15 or something, it's just gonna like call 360 cold or something like that. You know, this is the kind of situation where I really do expect a lot of folds. And even if I get a call from player 2 or player 4, whatever. It's still a situation where the SPR will be super, super small. It's a super easy spot. Sure, it's not really fun when player 1 decides to 4-bet jam, but I don't expect that to happen a ton. So I'll just squeeze and go forward from there. So all that being said, here does decide to call, so we'll look at the hand as played. We end up getting called by player 9, shocking, go here. And in this situation, obviously it's not the biggest SPR in the entire world. Against like player 4 and player 1, we're looking at give or take around 4 SPR, not that much larger versus player 2, and only about 2 and change SPR against player 9. And whenever I have a huge monster draw and the SPR isn't very large, whenever it's small, like against player 9, I'm always going to stack that. And even to be honest, with like 3 to 5 SPR, I'm typically going to play monster draws really aggressively. So my question is, should I check raise or should I donk? And this is the kind of situation where I think this board is going to get bet almost always by somebody. I'm not sure who, but I expect if anyone has a pocket pair, and if they have a set, whatever, good for them. There's only 9 combos of those, so I don't really care. But what I'm really looking is to get someone to bet things like 8s or 9s and I can apply a lot of pressure, or someone bets like deuces or 5s and I can apply a lot of pressure, or they have like 7-8 and I can apply a lot of pressure. So I'm just probably going to go for a check raise here and feel pretty comfortable with it. End up getting a very small bet from player 2, still going to keep with my check raise mentality, and I like the fact that we sized it at roughly around pot, so happy with this so far. Player 9 decides to jam, whatever. Again, I was going to stack off against him either way, and in this situation, when it gets back to us, we're getting a super sick price, never ever going to fold, and that was one of the questions, but there's just no getting away from this. It's a roughly 2 SPR effective against him when we see the flop, so yeah, we're taking this to the felt very, very happily, and we're just going to have to improve, and unfortunately, we don't. Just is what it is. So again, we don't want to panic about the result here, but what we do really want to consider is, was pre-flop played well? Should we have squeezed or should we have flatted? As played post-flop, check raise looks great, size looks great, calling player 9 shove looks great. So not worried about post-flop at all, but pre-flop is the really, really important thing, because if you play ace-king incorrectly pre-flop, your post-flop decisions can just get really, really awkward, whereas by playing more aggressively pre-flop, life would have not only been easier, but also more profitable. So Steve, thanks for the great hand, and if you or anyone else has a poker-related hand or question, feel free to leave it on our Google Plus page. Leave a link for that in the description box, and also please make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this type of video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, good luck out there, and happy grinding.